like a Hellcat.
Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review, and today we have got one of the most historic games probably ever made, the game that kick-started the survival horror genre, brought it on leaps and bounds into what we know today. A game that was originally on the PlayStation but was converted to the Saturn, came out in July of 1997. I can only be talking about the one, the only, Resident Evil.
Bizarre murder cases have recently occurred in Raccoon City. There are outlandish reports of families being...
So, after a series of bizarre murders occur on the outskirts of Raccoon City, the STARS department from the Raccoon City police force are sent to investigate. Contact with the Bravo team is lost, and the Alpha team investigates their disappearance. They find the helicopter that's been crashed. There's no one there. Suddenly, a bunch of wild dogs attack them. The helicopter pilot, Brad Vickers, panics. He flies off and he leaves Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Albert Wesker, and Barry Burton alone, and they have to escape into a nearby abandoned mansion where, obviously, as they explore it, they find all kinds of horrific things have been going on, and they have to try and get to the bottom of it, whilst also seeing if there are any surviving members of the Bravo team.
Resident Evil.
So at the start of the game, you've got a choice between two characters, Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield, and it depends on who you pick as to how the game pans out. A different character will be missing at the start of the adventure, and certain things will be different throughout the game as well. One thing I want to say and point out before I talk about how the game looks and plays and all of that kind of stuff is that it was genuinely fun and enjoyable to revisit the original Resident Evil so many years after I'd originally played it on the Saturn. It must be at least 20 years, probably more, since I played this game on the Saturn, and it really is still so enjoyable to this day. So of course, as always, we're going to take a look at how it looks, how it plays, how it sounds, what kind of lifespan it's going to give you, and is it worth playing today, and can it muscle its way into our Sega Saturn top 10?
Chris? Take care.
So, as always, I'm going to start with the way the game looks, and thankfully Resident Evil has been ported from the PlayStation really well. In general, I haven't really got any gripes with the graphics at all. The backgrounds look decent, the character models, even though they're old 3D models, still look reasonably good, especially if you play it on a CRT like it was designed for. I think the game still looks okay in general. There's not really anything negative I can say about it. There's lots of variety, you know. The mansion's a really big place. There's underground areas, other places to explore as well throughout the game, so it doesn't get too boring, the visuals, which is really nice. There's a bit of variety in the enemies. You know, you've got zombies, snakes, hunters, a few bosses as well, so there's a bit of variety there. I haven't really got anything negative to say. Even though it's an old 3D game, I think it's one of the few that actually doesn't look too bad in this day and age. In terms of performance as well, I think in general it performs really well. There's a few little bits of slowdown here and there, but they're not major, they're not problematic. The only other negative I would say is obviously the mesh effect transparencies that are in the game. The water doesn't look very good. Some of the explosion effects, they again don't look very good, but the Saturn is notorious for those things. But overall, Resident Evil on the Saturn is a pretty decent looking game. So moving on to the sound effects and the music of the game, and it's a real strong point for the game. The music is used to fantastic effect to create suspense and try and put the fear in you, and it succeeded massively at the point in time when it came out. It really was so unique in the way the music would come on when something is lurking, there is danger, and it fits the game brilliantly. I haven't got a single negative thing to say about the music in this game. Sound effects for all the weapons, they're all fantastic as well, and the enemies. The only downside is what some people would call a downside anyway, is the voice acting, because it is so stiff and so rigid, it just doesn't come across as natural and I find a certain comedy value in it, in all fairness, nowadays, but it is probably the only gripe really, with the sound effects and the music within the game, that the voice acting is as bad as it is.
But why are you asking?
Listen, the stars are going to be finished soon. Someone is a traitor.
So moving on to the way Resident Evil plays, and I'd actually forgotten how simplistic this game is. You simply move with the D-pad. A is your run button, B is your action button. Holding R gets your weapon ready, and pressing start brings up the menu. And that is it. So controlling the game is pretty straightforward. Now, how much you enjoy the way it plays is probably going to depend on when you originally played this game. Because if you played it anywhere within probably 3 years of it being released, you will be fine. If you perhaps played Resident Evil 4 or 5 or 6 before you played the original, then you may find it tougher to play because it's quite stiff. It's quite rigid in the way it plays, and you have to open your menu to change your weapon, to cure yourself, to look at the map. And some people will probably find this a bit frustrating and a bit niggly and a bit irritating. Now, if you played it way back when, like me, you don't really have a problem with it because you know it plays like this, so you're used to it and you're fine, and it's okay, and it's part of the experience, in all fairness. But like I said, you probably won't like it so much if you didn't play it when it originally came out. Another thing I need to say is, if you come into this game thinking you're going to be running around blasting all the zombies with your guns willy-nilly, you will probably be disappointed, because it is not that kind of game. There's lots of exploration, there's lots of puzzle solving. Yes, you take down zombies and dogs and other monsters with the guns, but there's not an infinite supply of ammo in this game, so you can't just go around using all your bullets up. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck, and it's going to become pretty difficult, in all fairness. So you do have to be tactile sometimes with taking down certain enemies. Another thing to point out about the way the game plays is the fact that it'll be slightly different depending on if you pick Chris or if you pick Jill, because Jill starts with 8 item slots and starts with a handgun, whereas Chris does not start with a handgun and only starts with 6 item slots. So when you control as Chris, you're going to be doing far more backpedaling to all of the chests to put items in, get items out, that kind of stuff. So there is that to take into consideration when you first play the game. And if you're playing it for the first time, I would probably suggest playing as Jill, just for the fact that she can hold 8 items. It does make it a little bit easier playing as her. But overall, my opinion of the way that Resident Evil plays is that it still plays really well, and that's mainly down to the fact that I know how it plays. I'm used to it. Like I said, if you're coming into it now, you might struggle and you might not enjoy it as much, but for me, Resident Evil still plays great to this day. So moving on to lifespan, and thankfully Resident Evil does pretty well in this department too. Obviously you've got 2 games to play through, either Jill or Chris. Each one will take a few hours if you do it at a leisurely kind of pace. I mean, you can speed run this game in a couple of hours if you really want to. But, you know, if you take your time and savour it, 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours. Really depends on how quick you want to do it. And you can unlock the battle game as well, which will give you a bit more of a lifespan as well once you've done the main game as the 2. The Saturn version does have a little bit more as well, altered costumes and a few more enemy reskins and stuff, so there is that as well. So overall, in the lifespan department, Resident Evil isn't too bad. Obviously, if you can complete the game within a certain time limit, you can unlock the infinite ammo rocket launcher as well, which can be a nice bit of fun to blast through the game with that. So all in all, Resident Evil's lifespan is pretty good. So, of course, that means we need to move on to the question, is Resident Evil still worth playing today? And I'm going to say something similar to what I said to Mysteria, because I said with Mysteria, if you could overlook the way the game looked, then you could enjoy the game for what it was. Now, I'm going to say the same thing for Resident Evil, because if you're going into it having never played it, you are probably going to have to overlook the way it plays, because you may find this off-putting. Like I said before, someone like myself who played it many years ago, it's not a problem because I'm used to it and I know it plays like that. But if you're playing it for the first time, you might find it clunky and a bit awkward to play, and it might nullify a lot of the enjoyment. But in my opinion, Resident Evil is still worth playing today. It is still a blast. And that takes us on to our next question. Does it make our Sega Saturn top 10? And the answer to that question is yes. Yes, it does. It comes in at number 8, meaning it's bumped Sega Rally down a place. And I genuinely think Resident Evil is still a brilliant game to this very day. And it is well worth a place in our PAL Saturn top 10, no doubt in my mind. The big question is, what are your thoughts on Resident Evil? What did you think of the Sega Saturn version in comparison to the PlayStation version, perhaps? And how well do you think it holds up in this day and age? I mean, I think a lot of people probably wouldn't want to play it. A lot of people have played the newer versions, and they won't have gone anywhere near the older versions, in all fairness. But for me, it's still enjoyable. It still plays fine, and I've really enjoyed playing it for the review as well. And that is what this is all about for me. Going back, looking at games or playing new games, trying to see how much enjoyment they bring me in this day and age, and Resident Evil is still enjoyable to this very day. So that is it today. Thank you for watching, and as always, I will be back soon in the future for another Saturn review. Goodbye for now.